Welcome to Capitol Preview, a weekly bipartisan discussion with Iowa legislators about the key issues facing our state. Brought to you by MediaCom.
Good morning. My name is Bill Peard. I'll be the host this morning on Capitol Preview. Our guest this morning is Senator Charles Schneider, Republican from West Des Moines. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Morning. Oh, you're quite welcome. We're anxious to hear what's going on in your eyes up at the Iowa State House. So Senator, why don't you kind of we'll start in and we'll just kind of have a conversation about what your key issues are or what some of the issues are that you want to discuss this morning. So
sure.
One of the biggest issues each year is the budget. And what does the current budget situation look like to you?
Well, it's going to be a difficult budget year. We have some headwinds economically, and the Revenue Estimating Conference, which meets 3 or 4 times each year, most recently met in December of 14, and they actually revised downward the amount of general fund revenue that they think the state will get. Previous to December, they thought the state would grow by about 7.6%. They revised that number down to 5.7%, I believe it was, which ends up being about a $133 million shortfall than what they had previously projected. For the next fiscal year, they're projecting that our revenue will grow by even less, by only 4.9%. At the same time, over the last few years, we've seen spending increase at about an average of 7% over the last 2 fiscal years. So yeah, obviously there's not a lot of room for us to maneuver, and we really need to start reining in spending and focusing on making sure that we're setting the state up for success down the road and not overspending.
What do you think the reason for the shortfall is, Senator? I mean, obviously ag prices, the ag economy has dropped a little bit. Is that some of the...
I think that's a big reason for it. We're still a very agricultural-based state. We will continue to be. That's just who we are as Iowans.
Right.
And we have seen a sharp drop in commodity prices over the last year. Part of the reason for that, I think, is because the dollar is stronger today than it was a year ago. That tends to put downward pressure on commodity prices because we have to compete with other countries, and when we export our commodities overseas, if we're competing with less expensive crops, and we've got to make sure that ours are priced competitively too. So
absolutely,
and that'll probably continue into the next couple of years, I think.
Another issue I think that's important to you is the Partnership for Economic Progress commissioned the Badel Institute to update a previous study on Iowa's approach to economic development. Were there findings in that report that stick in your mind?
Yeah, the one that really stuck out in my mind is where they showed Iowa ranking in terms of the business tax climate. In Iowa, we don't have beaches or beautiful weather all year round,
right.
So we can't compete in some of those areas, and that makes it all the more important that we're competitive, not only regionally but nationally when it comes to our business tax policy. And the Battelle study actually cited a study that was done by the Tax Foundation that showed Iowa's business tax climate is ranked 41 out of the 50 states.
So we've got some work.
We do.
Yeah.
And the two tax areas that really are hurting Iowa are the personal income tax rate and the corporate income tax rate. We have the highest top marginal corporate income tax rate, and our top marginal personal income tax rate is 8.98%, and that's just too high.
Didn't the legislature take up a property tax issue last year? And tell me how that relates with our tax situation.
With our what situation? Tax situation?
Our tax situation.
The
Battelle references here.
Right. We did pass 2 years ago a comprehensive property tax reform bill, and that did reduce the property tax burden that Iowa residents and businesses face, and it will really have more lasting impact in years going forward too, because it limited the rate at which the property tax burden can grow. So that will help us.
All right, very good. Also, I know that the governor has talked about forming a citizens commission to undertake a comprehensive review of Iowa's public pension systems, and I think this is one of the things that you reference here. Why is that an important issue?
This is an issue that really flies below the radar every year. Not a lot of people pay attention to it.
Right.
The reason it's important is because we have 4 major public pension systems, and they are all underfunded to varying degrees. The largest of those systems is IPERS, and at the end of 2013, it was funded at 82 or 83% and faced a $5.7 billion shortfall. That's with a B.
Senator, why don't you just for the people that aren't aware of IPERS, what is the IPERS program or system?
Sure, that's the Iowa Public Employees Retirement System. So it's a pension system, a defined benefit program that employees pay into and that taxpayers pay into. Yeah. And because we're underfunded to that degree, there's less retirement security for public employees who are starting their employment today, and there's less certainty for taxpayers in out years as well. Because we don't know if we have enough, well, we know today we don't have enough money set aside to pay all those obligations, and something needs to be done about it.
Yeah. What do you think you would like to see happen to get this thing straightened out?
Well, the governor said that he's going to put together a citizens committee to look at the issue, and I think that's the most important first step, because that would involve getting all the stakeholders together in a room and working together, representing taxpayers and public employees and the unions, all getting together and taking a realistic look at the situation, hopefully taking politics out of it and just focusing on what really needs to happen in order to make sure that we have some financial stability going forward, and so that we know that the retirement of a person who starts work with the state today is just as secure as the person who retires today.
Yeah, that's great, and it sounds like that's a great program and much needed, so I hope the governor's Citizen Review Board gives us some good direction on where to go.
Yeah, me too.
The governor is also making domestic violence one of his priorities for this legislative system. He recently proposed legislation to address the issue of repeat domestic abusers. Why don't you walk us through some of the bill's provisions?
Sure, this is a good bill. I had a chance to review it and talk about it on Iowa Public Radio's River to River program last week. Not to plug another show during this one, I apologize.
No, we all are here to educate the electorate. So
I had a chance to look through it, and I think it's a great bill. It does several things. It increases the mandatory minimum sentence for people who've been convicted of domestic abuse 3 times or more. It also reduces the amount of time off for good behavior someone can earn, and requires that they serve at least 85% of their sentence, which is more than they can under current law. And it also increases the maximum penalty for third-time domestic abusers. And at the time someone is either set to go out on parole or to be released from their sentence, they have to go through a risk assessment. And if the result of that risk assessment is that the person is a potential threat to their former victim, to the person they victimized before getting sentenced, or to the public at large, they have to utilize GPS monitoring. And a judge can also require that that person pay the cost of the GPS monitoring so that it's not borne by the taxpayers. So overall, I think it's a great bill, and I'm looking forward to seeing it go through the legislative process.
Yeah, I think it's important that we take up this issue. It's a big thing. Also, I know that we've talked about some pretty important issues that face Iowa, and it looks like they're being addressed by the governor and the State House. One thing that's in the news and has been prevalent in the news is our broadband issue. I know it's a huge subject, it's a huge area to cover, but why don't you give me just a thumbnail sketch of how you feel about Iowa's broadband and where you think that's going to go in the State House this year.
Sure. And our broadband infrastructure is also another element of the Battelle study that was released earlier this year. And one of the things that study pointed out is that we do need to have a strong broadband infrastructure in our state. And I agree with that assessment. more and more agriculture relies on being able to upload information to communicate and determine what the yields are looking like, what soil moisture levels look like, and soil temperature levels are. And in order for businesses throughout the state to grow, even in the rural areas, they need to have more broadband access than they currently have. In a lot of areas of the state, we have great access, but there are certain pockets in rural Iowa particularly where we do need to improve their access to broadband. Mm-hmm. So I'm hopeful we can move something forward and get something done on that this year.
Yep. What else, Senator? What else would you like to talk about a little bit? I know we've talked about some pretty important, heady stuff. So is there anything else that you're working on or that you'd like to see the legislature take up or has become prevalent?
Well, there are always issues that I'm working on for constituents of mine that I'd like to make some progress on, and they run the gamut from dealing with eminent domain to helping police officers be certified to teach driver's ed so that they don't have to get a substitute teacher's certificate to teach, or not a substitute teacher certificate, but be licensed as a teacher to teach, and a whole host of other issues too. So I'm always trying to work on something for my constituents, and those aren't always in the news, but they're more important to them than some of the bigger issues that we talk about on a daily basis and that make the headlines.
Absolutely, Senator. One more thing, any predictions of the legislature session this year? Is it going to get out on time, or do you think this is going to be an overtime with some of these very important and complicated things that are going to be taken up in this session?
I hope we get out on time, but a lot of people are saying that we're probably going to run overtime again this year. Yeah. So either way, I think it's important that we just focus on doing what's in the best interest of the taxpayers.
Absolutely. You guys work hard. Well, thank you, Senator. Appreciate very much you coming in for Capitol Preview this morning. Stay tuned for our next segment. We'll have Senator Chaz Allen, Democrat from Newton, Iowa.